are in lesson 3 of our workbook on being devoted to one another. Is this good, Charles? Okay. And it's based on the verse. What happened? Here we go. All right, thank you. It's based on the verse of Romans 12 and verse 10 about being devoted to one another, be devoted to one another in brotherly love, giving preference to one another in honor. What was that quote you sent me of a different translation, Brad? What did it say? Outdo one another. Yeah. Give preference or outdo one another in honor. It's a great thought. Not in a vain competition, but the zeal behind it. So anyway, the idea of yielding or giving preference to or willing to do whatever it takes to be at peace with one another because of our devotion to one another. We need this study, as Wilson points out in the book, because we do have an enemy who is trying to divide us and separate us. Andy, it's not working, brother. Sorry. All right. And he's trying to get us to be at odds with one another and to be suspicious of one another, to doubt one another, to think the worst in one another. And so we have this force, if you will, this influence working against us, because Satan is delighted when Christians tear down each other, as we pointed out in our last study. He wants us to gossip. He wants us to be overcritical and judging. He wants us to complain about one another and to criticize. All these things that are carnal. This is what the devil wants us to do. But of course, God is wanting us to do something much greater than that. And that's have brotherly love or being devoted to one another. You'll have to do it back there, brother, if you would. It's not working. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
We've been studying so much about we're supposed to love one another and how we're supposed to treat each other. I want to go one level deeper. Deuteronomy 22, verse 6 and 7. It says, take care of your animals. If you do this, God will bless your life and prolong your days. See, God even expects us to love and take care of our animals. There's several other scriptures in the Old Testament about feeding your animals regularly, not overworking them. So, you see,
Yeah.
to me, that kind of gives us an insight into how God,
right.
We're supposed to treat everybody, everything.
Yeah, I got you. Because they would rely on these animals for their livelihood, and so that's amazing that God would even put that in there, those regulations too. But the consideration even of an animal, that's a good point, because even if animals are to be treated with respect, especially in those settings, then naturally it should be that with you and me. And so to counteract this tendency to want to think the worst in one another or to be divided, God tells us view each other as a body, members of a body, but then members of a family. You're a family is what God wants us to think about one another. And these are all images that God uses to call us to a higher standard of living, higher principles, instead of being selfish and carnal and worldly like we have been or are all capable of being. Okay, so we have this concept of helping each other grow and helping each other. Well, I don't want to just. What are we trying to help each other do? Let me ask it that way. As a church, what are we trying to help each other do? All right, grow spiritually. Get to heaven. Exactly. Help each other get to heaven. We want to be together. We want to see one another blessed in that relationship with God. Yeah. So growing, maturing, and that's all going to require what? to help each other grow? What do you need to help a church grow? Did someone what now? Patience? Unity? Love? Exactly. Right. Willing to encourage, willing to build up and to outdo one another in honor, humility. Say what now? Yeah, right. Caring for, taking care of one another. All these things that you see from firsthand experience in a family. We all have experience with these qualities because we know the need and the importance of them and how you have to work at it in a family, right? In order for that relationship to succeed. But you're wanting your family to excel because of your love for them. Well, so it is with you and me. God gives us an opportunity to grow spiritually in a smaller family unit, which is the local church. That's a great thought. And so we see how He wants us to be children of God. He's the Father. Jesus is our older brother, as the lesson pointed out. But we're all children. We're adopted, but we're all children of God. We represent Him. We represent Christ. Now, He says that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God, without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. So the question was this when we ended last class: what responsibilities do we have before the world as members of God's family? And not just to one another, right? Which is what we're talking about as well. But thinking of the consequences of how we treat one another. What responsibilities do we have to the world? That is, those who are not part of this church or not members of the Lord's body. What responsibilities do we have as members of God's family? Yes, right, to love, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, exactly. To set that example then of obeying the laws of the land, which is a big issue. That's a big problem in our society. So many conflicts are happening because people defy the law or authority. Yeah, Donna. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Whether or not we're people of integrity, certainly, as we do business in the world. Okay? So, again, we're supposed to shine as lights and view each other as family before the world. Did I see other? Go ahead, Jonathan. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And does our relationship with one another, how we treat one another, have any, bearing in that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. To win more to the Lord. Yeah. So, our relationship to one another has an influence factor on the world. Go ahead, Gene. Did you have something? Okay. Uh huh. Yeah. We do. I mean, definitely have to uphold the truth, share it in love. Um, but the way we live can either open doors or close doors, right, for the gospel. And so that's kind of what we're getting at. Did you have something, Janet? You done? Got it. Okay. Bill? Uh huh. Yeah. Hmm. Okay. How about that? Right. Because it's yeah, because that workload's lighter or easier when they work together instead of one doing it all. So they work together. We need to work together. Jack? Yeah. Right. All right. So firm, fair, and what else? Consistent. So no favoritism then, right? It's just equality, the genuine character and love across the board. Larry, did you have something? Yeah. Right. Yeah. True. Love for all. So look at this. You look at the headline, okay? Tomorrow. Member of a church sues fellow member over a disagreement. Okay? Which happens. Has happened, it does happen, can happen. So what do you think? What message does this convey to the community when members of a church are suing one another? They don't have a Christian attitude in what sense? All right? Okay. Won't compromise. Okay. Lacking an example of love. What else is that message? Let's just say two members or whatever, a group of members at Riverstone are suing one another. What's the world going to think about that? Say what now? We're not united. Yeah, right. There's a disconnect somewhere, right? There's an inability to communicate and an inability to resolve conflict, right? And that's exactly what Paul talked about in 1 Corinthians chapter 6 in this gamut of issues this church was having. They had brethren suing one another. Any of you having a matter against another go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints? Do you not know that the saints will judge the world, but brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers? See, he's saying, look, all this is bad, but now you're taking it out into the world, and you're just it's it's just bringing more and more conflict to the situation. Did I see a hand? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So how does that an indication of hypocrisy when we sue one another like that? Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And here we're supposed to represent Christ, right, who is selfless, did not come to be served, but to serve, to humble himself, to wash feet. And I've given you that example. You humble yourself, you lower yourself, promote one another. Okay? Well, how's that message getting out to the world when Brother X is suing Brother Y? Go ahead, brother. Oh my word. Wow. Yeah. That's horrible. That is horrible though. For brethren to come to this passage and say, look, I get a free pass. You can't touch me. Oh, but somebody is going to touch him. You know? He's going to have to answer to that. Go ahead, brother. Okay, right. The attitude behind it all. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. True. Yeah, that's true. Because that's what Paul is rebuking them for. That, look, you know, why do you not rather accept wrong? Why do you not rather let yourselves be cheated? No, you yourselves do wrong and cheat. That's bad, but then you do it before non Christians. That's extra bad. Because now you're doing evil, but now your evil is having greater consequences because of what it's saying to the world. You see? So we have to work on this. Go ahead, Blake. Okay. Yeah. Right. Right. Because of what reason? Now, why not go before the unbelievers with stuff like this? Why? Why not? Exactly. Yeah. How does that entice people to hear our message or to consider what we're doing here as a church when we're willing to cheat and do wrong with one another, or at least show that we cannot get along or work things out. And that's what Paul was. What are you doing, people? What are you doing? It's bad enough you're doing this to one another, but look at what you're doing to your influence as a church, which goes to show, again, we have an obligation to one another because it's right, but also because the world's watching. You see, not hypocritical, but just mindful of the potential of what can happen in our relationships. Now, he says, why do you not rather accept wrong? Okay? So he's telling somebody, look, you may have gotten the short end of the business deal. Okay? Why don't you just accept wrong? That reminds me of what you said the other night, Chris. You may not remember this, but talking about you went to a place and the server, you went to a restaurant, the server had another table, and that previous customer had left this woman a $20 tip on the table. But before she could get back to it, another customer came and sat down at that table. And in the course of the thing, she didn't want to go get it. Well, that customer took her money and put $3 back. Dale, we know about it. No, but he took the money and switched it out. But she was upset. And then what did you tell her, Chris? Right, right. If he can live with doing that, you can live without it, and you'll never go hungry. You know, just basically consoling her, but saying, look, you can survive this. You can survive this injustice. Well, that's what Paul's saying. Look, why don't you just accept wrong? If it's truly wrong, God's going to respond to it one day. But look at this. This leads me to a question. How should we treat one another when we disagree? How should we treat one another when we disagree? Yeah. Okay. Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, look, why do you not rather let yourselves be cheated? Yield. Think of what happens when this conflict is not resolved quickly and then it spills over into the community. So, yeah, we have to be willing to yield, surrender, humble ourselves, is what these verses are challenging us to. Okay, what else? How should we treat one another when we disagree? Well, right, right. When you're just willing to, you love that person so much. You love them so much that you want peace and you want this relationship to work. And so, yeah, you humble yourself and you move on from it. Go ahead, Gerald. Right. Yeah. True. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Be willing to take a loss like that, if you will, to try and keep that relationship peaceful. Yeah. Hmm. 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 How about that? How about that? How about that? So, not promote it then, throughout the church, to accept it, right? To accept that. Now, again, if it's blatant and things are obvious and it can be addressed and solved, then obviously we need to, do what we can to have sin repented of, obviously. But if it cannot be resolved like that, then we just, yeah, we accept the loss and we move on. Go ahead, Steph. Hmm. Right. That's true too. Yeah. How about that? That's a great point. So yeah, you could still teach a great lesson by enduring that loss. Did I see a hand? Yes, sir. You repenting now, or what we doing? Okay, go ahead. Okay, right, exactly. Again, if it can't be resolved, yeah, then we have to be willing to be at peace. Go ahead, brother. Okay. Hmm. 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 Right. 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 Drawing a line on. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point. That's the challenge with Christians because we're passionate people. We're people who have the conviction of right and wrong and wanting to do right and doing what we believe is right. But yeah, it can stem over to areas that you don't need to have that division. Jack, go ahead. Yeah, that's it. Do unto them as you would have them do unto you. Right. And the idea is like tonight, how would you want your family to be treated? Right? That's what we're looking at. We're to view each other as family. Well, you'll defend your sibling, you'll defend your parents, your children, you'll you know you'll go the extra mile to promote them, and that's what God's teaching us. We should have that same concern to elevate one another, because you've seen this at home. You have conflicts. Well, what are you going to do if you're not going to have an agreement on opinion? What do? You accept it and move on, because like I think you said it the other day, Brad, right? We're not all going to agree on everything. There are some things we can't disagree on, obviously, doctrinal matters, but then there are things we are not going to agree on. Go ahead, Blaine. Have a Bible? That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Turn to the Word of God. Yes, sir. Hmm. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And so how are you shining as lights in the world, right? When you're defiant like that. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Because we do yield to the law. The only time we don't is when it conflicts with God's, exactly. But if it doesn't, then we are peaceable people. Uh huh. Uh huh. Hmm. Hmm. Right. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The way we live, our attitude, it either opens doors or closes doors. Johnny. Oh, sorry, Johnny. Then Mike, if you would please. Yeah. Uh huh. Mm-hmm. Right. Of course. Of course. That's right. Well, but that's in keeping with the law, though, right? You still have to yield to the law. So we can't. Well, I mean, even there's scripture on that. Paul was not going to keep Onesimus. No. Yeah. So you have to surrender to the law. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mike. And by the way, we know Johnny will. Don't get locked in a room with him, is what he said. So. We ought to obey God. Yeah. Right, with keeping the regulations at that time. Yeah. Right. And that was rare. That was a rare situation. We were all going through stuff like that for the first time and trying to work through all the threat, the threat of our health and the nation or whatever. There's another hand you say? Oh yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Right. Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Yes, it does. That's right on the money. Mhm. Mhm. Right. Yeah. And again, the idea is I became all things to all men that I might win, right? Win some to the Lord. So we're not compromising our morals, but we're yielding where we can. Go ahead, Kelly. Yet. That's a good way of looking at it. Not Christians yet. That's a really good way of putting it. All right, brethren. So he says, look, you got to treat these older men like you would your father, younger men as you would your brothers, older women as you would your mothers, younger women as your sisters with all purity. You've learned these principles in the home, is what he's saying. Apply them in the family, the spiritual family. And the reason we do that in the home is because we love, we're devoted to our family. We want to see our family excel. Well, there it is. So we take it and apply it to the church, that it's not just something we do, it's something that we are, it's an attitude. Love is genuine, it's real. You have the same care for one another as what God is teaching us. Now, this is a cool point that Wilson makes in the book on being devoted to one another. Blood is thicker than water, he points out. But this is a really neat thought. He says that everyone, on page 16, everyone craves a sense of belonging. It is why gangs are popular in the inner city. Thus, people are drawn to us when they are given that same sense of belonging. That's a great thought. Because there's a reason. I mean, why are gangs popular? And a lot of times it's what? What's happening there in that dynamic? Right, right. They created a family. And so these people are willing to do these things to be part of this group. Well, that leads me to a thought, though. How can we create an atmosphere of belonging in this church? How do you create that? How do you create an atmosphere that it's similar, right? The motivation is similar where I want to be part of that group because of what? How do you create that? Oh, Blake, go ahead. Okay. Right. Why? Why is that the case? Right. Okay. Right. Exactly. And that we're all equal. We all have the same love for one another. So yeah, this idea of an environment of accepting, welcoming, certainly that's good. What else? Oh yeah, go ahead, Chris. Hmm. Right. Right. That's a good. Thank you for sharing that. I agree. That's a really neat thing to look at after services, is because people are waiting for me to break out another sermon, is what it is. They're just hoping I preach again. And people, you got to go. Mike has left the building. You know. So I got one fan. So go ahead, Chris. That's awesome. Thank you, brother, for sharing that. Yeah, because that's but see, that's true. But we gotta create the atmosphere where it's not just now, it's into the future. Oh, go ahead, Don. True. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. That genuine concern and love, compassion. Go ahead, Larry. Yes. How about that? There you go. Love is thicker than blood. Yeah. There is such a thing as people not of the same physical family, but having the affection of that. That there is one who is closer than a brother, is what Proverbs talks about. But see, that's what can be developed, and that's what has to be nursed, I guess. Nursed and guided and promoted and taught on, that love needs to be without hypocrisy, the way God teaches it. It's real, okay? But again, the idea is we are committed to one another with genuine affection, okay? So, looking at this, the idea of siblings is pointed out in our lesson, that we have this brotherly love. We use the term brethren. You don't use the term cistern, but you do use the term brethren. And brothers, you'll get that at like midnight tonight. And then we have this family, this heritage with one another. And we do this because of the affection. And that's how it's used, that we call each other brother and sister, because we see that in one another, this relationship, this bond. I love the way Abram worded it. Eventually Abraham, but still, Lot, his nephew, their people, their clans were clashing. And he says, look, let there be no strife between you and me, between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. That is awesome. That's a great verse. He's saying, look, Lot, we don't need to be fighting because we're family. And so he had a peaceful resolution. He said, look, I'll go one way, you go the other. I'm letting you choose. You pick, because we want to have peace. You see? That's what God's calling us to, this idea of yielding, because we're family. So when we have a conflict, I'm not saying, okay, I'm out the door, I'm never seeing you again. I want it to work out. I love this church. I love the people. And so we need to try and work it out. Okay? And that requires commitment. Let brotherly love continue. Yeah, I'm patronizing. I am. But let brotherly love continue. Go ahead, brother.
With that thought of love and caring for one another, that happens. That's a continual thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you talk and fellowship with
Yeah.
your brothers and sisters, the more that bond grows.
Right.
And that love gets greater.
Mm-hmm.
And worshiping together,
Yes.
to me, is a great privilege.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do it in harmony, in unity, and in love, there's such a greater depth to your worship.
Right.
I've been to churches, and I had trouble staying awake because you can tell nobody likes anybody.
Just going through the motions.
Here,
Yeah.
there's that love. And after church, like they were talking
Yeah.
about, people talk and fellowship,
Right.
and ask you how you doing, how
Mm-hmm.
anybody in your family
Makes a difference.
problem.
Yeah.
They care.
Right.
You can't fake it. It's genuine love.
Exactly.
It's great.
And it doesn't just stay here, in the building. It's something that's real. All right, I have to ask you this. He says, let brotherly love continue. But what are examples of brotherly love discontinuing? It's a good question. He says, let it continue. Well, what's it mean for it to discontinue? When does that happen? What's evidence of that? You see? And just going along, the betrayal. Yeah, Johnny. Mm-hmm. Right. Gotcha. Yeah, willing to go and work it out and resolve it. It's a good point. Yeah. Right. They were passionate. Yeah, exactly. He's useful. Yeah. Exactly. Right. And that you don't have the ego. You're willing to accept things as true and move forward. The last slide here. Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Love as brothers. Be tenderhearted. Be courteous. What's courteous mean? We never talk about that. What's it mean to be courteous? What's it mean to be courteous? Polite, respectful, giving preference to, right? Be courteous, be tenderhearted, not returning evil for evil. So even if there is evil and it can't be resolved, right? You don't return evil for evil. You don't do evil to one another. So he's teaching us all of this idea of commitment. All right. Anything else on tonight's lesson? So we're going into lesson 4 on Sunday, Grant, and continuing the idea of being devoted to one another. All right, brother. Thank you so much for your good comments.